Paris Fashion Week, and in my opinion it's the most exciting day of Paris Fashion Week because it's a kind of big change, new things in the air, and because it's Jonathan Anderson, JW Anderson's first collection for Loewe, so it's just a magical day, very exciting. I've got an amazing set of people with me to help unpick what's happening in Paris, what's happening at Loewe, what Jonathan Anderson is doing, and what this says about accessories, what this says about young designers, so many different topics to talk about. But before we dive in, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, starting with you, Oriole.
I'm Oriole Cullen and I'm a curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
I'm Georgina Goodman and I'm a shoe designer.
My name's Norris, I'm a trend forecaster and fashion historian.
I'm Hettie Judah, I'm a writer and editor specialising in fashion, art and design.
I'm going to start by putting everyone on the spot a little bit and saying, were we really happy, firstly when the announcement was made that LVMH were kind of buying into Loewe, but also with the appointment of JW Anderson at a big kind of luxury house? Was that an exciting thing in our minds? Hettie, I'm going to go to you because you've got sharp eye contact and you're on the end.
Darn it. Well, I mean, I think one thing you can say about Jonathan Anderson is he's not short of ideas.
Yeah.
So, you know, he has an abundance of things that he wants to do, and it's quite interesting to actually see that he did start to introduce some handbags into his last few collections, and I thought they were pretty interesting actually.
Yeah.
They were definitely things I was excited by. I mean, I think one thing that's quite extraordinary is that he's not only been put in charge of Loewe, but he's been allowed to continue his own house.
Yeah.
And he's had investment in that too, and so the fact that they're supporting him to, you know, continue this quite large workload, I think is, I mean, brave for somebody kind of quite unproven on that level. I mean, I think also Loewe is a kind of a interesting fit for him. He's been pursuing a pretty out there path, you know, in terms of his gender nautics and you know, a lot of his cutting's been quite challenging. I think that Loewe, although it kind of promotes itself as this very high luxury brand, is essentially quite a bourgeois brand. And, you know, I think maybe it's going to bring out some of his, you know, different aspect of what he does. It's not the Jonathan Anderson that we've seen so far, I would imagine.
That's interesting. You were nodding for a lot of that, Oriole. Do you really agree?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's really interesting, and it's exciting that LVMH are investing in someone like Jonathan Anderson. You know, it is sort of taking punt in a way, as you were saying. It isn't tried and tested. He's been around since 2008 and has a very interesting trajectory, the way that he's worked. So I think that is exciting, that they are willing to work with people, you know, that are a little bit different and challenging. And I think that's the thing about his work. It is challenging, and that's essentially what's exciting about it. You know, it is what you need, I think, in fashion is these ideas that challenge you and keep you interested and change things. So yeah.
Are you a fan of his work, Lucy?
Yes. I do feel that it's interesting that he's been picked above people like, for example, Jonathan Saunders and Richard Nicol. These people that I feel that were around just a little bit before him in the London fashion scene, and I've certainly seen this accelerated sort of trajectory for Jonathan that, you know, it's kind of incredible. Christopher Kane's only just got funding, and has only just been, you know, bought out by you know, Gucci Group. So it's this idea that it's almost enviable. You know, I'm almost thinking, oh wow, you know, it's incredible for him, and I think that the press have certainly got behind him. I think that he's very clever at what he does. He's an incredible. I see him as a mini little Marc Jacobs in the making, more than a kind of true designer. Because I think he's just a wonderful reference, sort of smash and grab kind of guy who's very, very clever at doing it. But I really see him moving. You know, he's got ambition, I think, unlike many sort of young designers in London. Certainly, no doubt about that. And I see him sort of, he's moving, he's got big plans, and like Hettie said, he's certainly not fazed by this amount of investment that's been put into him and this trust. And that ambition is to be, I guess, admired.
I'm interested by what you said, by this notion of a true designer as opposed to kind of your Marc Jacobs types, because I wonder if he is just kind of what a designer has to be these days, which is a part showman, part stylist, part this, part that. Do you think
that's a debate to be had. Exactly, what is a true designer and what is the criteria of a true designer? And I think that he understands how to assimilate the past into new ways and have people forget about what happened before, and somehow like whip them up into this sort of frenzy that he somehow is this new innovator that maybe nobody else is. And I think that when I see somebody doing that, I feel like they're kind of great at remixing what's gone on before in the past. That is a marketeer's job, which is why I compare him to a Marc Jacobs. You know,
I think he's a very modern version of a designer. I think to compare him with someone like Marc Jacobs is
I said
not
mini
quite,
Marc.
Yeah,
Jacobs.
mini
Sorry,
Marc.
I'm sorry, I'm not comparing him to Marc on any level. But he's very savvy.
Yeah.
You know, and more of those marketing-based sort of stylist sort of designers.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't cut. I mean, he's an incredible tailor.
But he's more of an image.
Yeah, and I
maker.
think that he's got this really wonderful sort of cohesive image that's now snowballing, and he's very astute at, like, for example, with the most recent Womenswear collection that he did in London this season, you know, he heard that it wasn't wearable and he made it goddamn sexy. I mean, it's really desirable, this latest collection that he's created, and he's really moving towards, I mean, he's a big fan of Phoebe Philo, and you can see that, and he's gunning for that arena, and a lot of her work, which has come from Helmut Lang, which has come from Margiela, I'm like, hello, these are the gods that these designers are worshipping, and he knows where to go digging for, you know, for the kind of philosophies, I guess, of design.
One thing I want to pick up a bit on is this role that, you know, Loewe makes so much money from its accessories. You know, you don't really, up until now, I think, really think of it remotely as a ready-to-wear brand. It's all bags and goods. And it seems almost like, it's interesting to talk about his workload, because it seems almost like the workload is even greater when I know so many luxury houses make their money through the bags and the shoes, etc. But this is a house that's predominantly known for this. So for me, it feels like the workload is even greater, because not only are people going to be focusing on it for the ready-to-wear, it is also for innovation and accessory. And I don't think there are many houses that you look at and you're kind of super excited to see what their head designer does with the accessories that season. It's always the clothes.
But not just accessories with this brand, is it?
Yeah, exactly.
They're talking about as much more of a lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
And I think that will suit him really well, because I feel that he is a person who probably looks at the whole picture.
Yeah,
not just about what the woman is wearing on her body, but what she's carrying, what she's driving, where she's eating, and I think that's how designers have to think now, because it is moving. A brand has to be a lifestyle. It isn't just about the clothes. It isn't just about what you're carrying. It's about how you're thinking and how you're feeling, and that's how he describes himself. He's an emotional designer, and I think that. But even though you can see all the references, I totally agree that you can see his clever references. Oh, there's a little bit of, you know, Yves Saint Laurent 1970s with that collar, I love all that as a fellow designer, to see those references. But how he uses them is really quite interesting and quite different, which is why, yes, there's something that when you look at what he does, you can see it's familiar. That's why it's desirable. For me, that's why it's desirable, because it's familiar. But I like the way he mixes up his references in a very modern, accessible, and I think that's what Loewe needs to be, is much more accessible. If people like us are going to desire that brand, because up till now I don't know what that brand really was, or I can't go, oh yeah, that's a Loewe bag, or that's a belt, or unlike a brand like Hettie, you absolutely know that is what it is, what it stands for. Do I desire it? So I'm really excited, because I would love to desire a Loewe item or bag, because I love the heritage of that company. Yeah. The fact that it is leather and it is, you know, it does have a kind of really old heritage. But up till now, I haven't been able to.
You're right.
So I'm trying not to cough into my microphone.
Okay. I was like, you look like you're going to die.
Please don't cough.
I want to pick up on your expertise specifically on accessories, obviously, because you're such a fantastic shoe designer. You've worked with so many different brands, and just give us an idea, kind of from an inside perspective, on how important like accessories are to the big brands. Because I think we all love to look at the ready-to-wear collections, but there are so many labels where we're analysing the collections and the clothes till we're blue in the face, but actually what's making the money is the handbags.
Okay, so this is an interesting brand, because if you work for a ready-to-wear brand and you're the shoe designer or the bag designer, you're very much, it's like you're not, you go with what the theme is or what the feeling is, and of course it's not sort of mentioned that shoes sell much more than the accessories or than the ready-to-wear. It's not kind of mentioned, because you'd only be selling your shoes because the catwalk's so amazing and etc. etc. But this is a ready-to-wear designer who's going to what is essentially an accessories company. Primarily, I'd say it's an accessories company, and so he's going to be bringing a whole energy to it, and it's going to. So all of the elements are important. So that everyone has to be on the same page, and a good creative director gets everyone on the same page. No one's vying against each other. You're all working really closely, and ultimately it's how much you've sold overall. Everything has to sell. One thing can't outsell another. That's a successful brand. Because if you are all about the bag and the shoes, what's the point in having the shoes? Or the ready-to-wear has to sell. The bags have to sell. The shoes have to sell. That's a successful brand. Which will then sell the makeup and the perfume and the other things that come along. So I think Loewe will be a brand that sells mostly leather goods, and the most important thing will not be the ready to wear. It'll all be equal.
But then do you also think that the ready to wear, and it's interesting that we've all kind of cited his role at getting a very strong kind of visual message out there. It feels like that's going to be what will sell the leather goods, perhaps not the design of the leather goods themselves, but more this notion of buying into
lifestyle. I think he'll be creating a desirable message of, I'd like to, throw that on my bed, or carry that, or whatever it is.
Definitely brings like a tribe with him. Like you said, an energy and a spirit, which will then sprinkle fairy dust onto all of the accessory lines, hopefully.
And it's interesting how aggressive they've gone with it almost feels like they're kind of Loewe hasn't just started, but it almost feels like it's like a real reboot,
Well, it is a reboot.
Completely.
Logo's different.
Exactly.
It's
But you don't usually get that much of a kind of changeover when you get a new designer in, like that quantity of
I think there was some real misjudgments under the last tenure. I think there was a failure to judge the mood. This is a Spanish brand. And I remember, they put out a bag called God, my brain's gone completely. The Granada bag. It was a £1,500 bag at a point where Andalusia was suffering its worst economic crisis in a very long time. There was mass unemployment. And it just seemed like it was a bad taste. I think it suffered from the same problem that's really hit Mulberry in a way, that they forgot who they were really selling to. They forgot who their core consumer was, and they were trying to be right up there with the Hermès bags. And the Hermès kind of client, and that isn't really who they should be marketing to.
And it's interesting because I think also we always talk on these panels about everyone becoming much more aware of fashion and knowledgeable of fashion, and I feel like that is filtering down to the way that accessories are bought. And I think there was a long while where kind of people didn't. I think the notion, we always talk about the it bag being dead, but I kind of think it's stronger than ever. I think people now really, perhaps not in specific bags, but in this notion of kind of people knowing about fashion, and they want a Saint Laurent bag now because they know about what's happening at Saint Laurent. I think the days of just buying a Mulberry bag because you want a nice leather bag are kind of over. I think people are more, it's about buying into a vision, which is quite interesting.
I think it's very interesting, for example, that Wang is Balenciaga, and he was the, I think the youngest designer to ever have an it bag. He was 27 when he had the bag at Alexander Wang, and surprise, surprise, they've got him at Balenciaga, and the runway's quite commercial, and it's all about being loaded with these bags, and these houses know that it's interesting for me to hear what you're saying in terms of the utopia of how everything should be equal, because my sort of I guess, perception is of these houses that, you know, that the perfumes and the handbags and the shoes are the petrol in the engine that make the couture happen and to a certain extent ready to wear.
But I don't think everything should be equal.
Absolutely. It's really lovely to hear different ways that it works.
But I guess everything should appear to be equal, maybe not be. I think that's what's quite interesting. I think that's what Vuitton do really well. Like it look, you know, especially when Marc Jacobs there and now with Nicolas Ghesquière, like there is this notion of like the ready-to-wear being so important, and it appears as being just as kind of valid as the accessories, but sells such small amounts. I think that's quite interesting. That kind of notion of.
But I think
your house is built on.
Louis Vuitton's really interesting. If you go into a Louis Vuitton shop, it's not the bags that are being bought; it's makeup bags and you know things that are printed canvas.
But he's done that. So I don't know if you guys have reviewed much of the menswear that he did, but it was so much. It was almost like kind of like knick-knacky type stuff. You know, like little Meccano key rings and little bits and bobs and like. And they're the most visually pleasing thing I've seen in ages. It's literally just a key fob, a keychain, and it was just leather, really sumptuous leather in like 5 really primary colours. Just a knot.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it was the best thing I've ever seen. I don't know what was. I wanted it so much, and it was like crazy, that kind of knick-knacky thing.
And you could afford it.
Yeah.
So that is really nice.
Yeah.
It's not now. I think that there's a shift, which is, you know, 5 years ago it'd be like you want it, and you can't have it, but I'm going to save up and I'm going to afford myself to have it. But now it's like, and you want the keyring.
Yeah.
There's a desirable thing that you can own and that you can have. I think that's very clever.
You were going to say?
I was just going to say, I did see that collection hanging up in Dover Street Market last week, and apparently, particularly the jeans, are selling like hotcakes. So
well, he's very good at doing these kind of pieces which are recognisably. Because his stuff always looks kind of refined and it looks quite non-shouty almost in a way, like especially this collection, a lot of people are like, oh, it's very classic, it's very kind of laid back, but he does things that are recognisably kind of, you know, those jeans, you know exactly what they are.
And they look much more extreme, you know, the turn-ups really go up to there when you see them hanging out on.
But I think real luxury brands, they often do the mistake of doing stuff that is too anonymous, and I think this has a really good veneer of anonymity, you know, like that kind of Bottega, like labelless luxury.
Absolutely.
But it's very labelled. I think that's a real smart thing to be able to do.
And one also forgets how good he is at doing knitwear, actually. He's had some really strong knitwear collections in the past, and that definitely came through in this collection as well.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit, sorry to jump in, but I really want to talk about this heritage of Loewe, and I'm interested in kind of Spanish design. I always pick on you for fashion history, obviously, sorry. But I think I don't think many people would say, oh, Spain, amazing history of fashion, but then like Balenciaga, it's incredible.
There is a very sort of interesting in culture in Spain, you know, fantastic designers, people like Sibila, and you don't really hear about. And I think Loewe, in a sense, is a bit of a sleeping giant for people outside of Spain, which sounds ridiculous in this day and age to say that, but you know, it's been around since the middle of the 19th century. Interestingly, I think it's a German name, the guy who went to Spain, and you know, that it's been a very profitable company, and I think in the 80s it did have quite an international reach, had a moment. But generally, you know, it's not a label that pops straight into your head when you're thinking.
I don't think it was like a high label particularly. I think it was, it was
a nice.
When I was doing the Delvaux history, I actually found legal notices between Delvaux and Loewe from the 50s, where Delvaux was suing them for stealing their designs. And then they ended up kind of coming to an agreement. It was a particular kind of a brand of luggage that they'd got that was very successul. And they ended up reaching an agreement and allowing Loewe to be the local producer of it down there. But I mean, I think, you know, there's this we've got this modern idea of luxury that I think wasn't necessarily applicable to something that
they did have like the royal seal though for the Spanish court, you know, in terms of the, you know, the kind of the little royal seal of preferred supply of luggage and leather goods for the Spanish royal family. So I think they think they're quite fancy.
But I do think that actually leather goods across the board, you know, it's only fairly recently in the last 20 years that they've become super luxury. They used to be affordable, you know. A lot of the brands now that are incredibly expensive, they were things that people could afford. You know, people often find in their grandmother's closet, you know, these kind of things. You think, wow, she had a... But actually they were more affordable.
I just think, the notion now of buying a leather suitcase is totally mad. You know, like, if you saw something...
You see people and you know they're rich.
Yeah, it's really interesting that.
It's artifact, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where it goes into artifact. You can commission a leather suitcase. Yeah. But
I really want
would
one
you
now,
want to
that's
use
all I
it?
can think about.
But you know, they repair it for like the rest of your life. It's like that kind of thing that,
Like a
you know,
Vuitton trunk.
yeah, like the exactly like the Vuitton trunk. You
Yeah.
just bring it in, and you know, it's like like you said, it's treated as an artifact.
Would we say, just to go back to the Spanish thing, because I'm kind of interested in this, would we, because we often talk on these panels and everyone in fashion talks about, you know, like London style and Italian, like the kind of generic Italian style that we see coming from Italian fashion houses, and you talk about the Parisian mood. Would we say that there is a Spanish sensibility, or is it harder to pin down because there's not a major fashion week there? Because it's interesting, because when you say, oh, do Spanish designers all have a similar ethos, you're like, well, of course not, that's totally mad. But then it's like we always do with Italian design. It's kind of
I can only talk for shoes, because there's a shoe museum in Elda, which is the sort of centre of shoe making in Spain. Sadly, it's not so many factories there anymore, because they're all closed down. So during the sort of 70s was their heyday, and made in Spain used to mean very, very expensive, very high quality. And they had this type of leather which was the thin goat. And all those shoes are made very, very beautifully with lots of embellishment and sort of moulded flowers and very, very artisan, beautiful hand-tinted colours. That's all made in Spain. And you probably got some in the museum, you made in. But they're just, and it did used to mean very, very high quality and very fine. And then, of course, manufacturing closed and it moved to cheaper places. And the factories closed down, and then made in Italy took over from being high-end quality. But there's this lovely museum, and you go there and it is, they've got all the shoes that were made there. Saint Laurent was made there, and that's the only one I remember because I was very fixated on that. But beautiful shoes, very fine.
That's interesting.
I mean, I think the thing that obviously we have to remember, you know, when we talk about design sensibilities of a particular country, is that until the 80s they were under an extremely oppressive political regime. So, I mean, all of that kind of pop culture and street culture that has nourished a lot of the the energy in design centres like Paris, Milan, and London. Didn't really kind of hit Spain until the 80s.
But it's interesting because that in itself can produce interesting stuff. You look at what's happening in Russia at the moment, you know, that's quite interesting.
I think it's a very, very, it might not have had a huge collective output in terms of designers, because there's not that many big hitters. But, you know, really, for example, Balenciaga and, you know, the legacy that he has given the world in terms of his influence from Spain. The work, the flamenco, you know, so the little crop top that Alexander Wang did with all the ruffles, Nicolas Chesquier did before he left. Balenciaga was inspired by Cristobal's obsession with the flamenco. So it's all those sort of really I guess really decadent and high drama sort of, it's kind of cliche. But then of course Dali's anger at what was happening in Spain, during the Civil War and all the fascism, had a huge influence on Elsa Schiaparelli's designs. It was all the torn dress that we spoke about on Project Ugly, and they were ripping dresses within.
Read Lucy's essay in Project Ugly. That's very good.
Little plug. So you know, this idea that you had Elsa Schiaparelli tearing couture pieces within the atelier, inspired by the anger that her and Dali felt of what was going on in Spain. So, I don't know, Spain has not had its... I mean, I think this is a time for Spain to find a truly modern, easy way of luxury, because I think it is caught up in very passionate climes.
It'd be interesting to see an exhibition on Spanish fashion, wouldn't it, now? And
well, there was a fantastic... Well, Hamish Bowles did a great show, and it was specifically about Balenciaga in Spain.
Which I did a piece on,
in New York and in the De Young in San Francisco.
Was it amazing?
It was really beautiful, and then sort of underlining, as you're saying, all of his influence.
The passion of the... You know, this repressed sort of, you know, the outsider, the flamenco, and how when she danced, it was, you know, just talking about kind of all the kind of origins of, you know, immigration and all this sort of kind of wonderful gypsy sort of, you know, Yves Saint Laurent had the peasant and Cristobal Balenciaga had the flamenco, and so
And the religious element too, which is really interesting.
Yes, so interesting.
Absolutely. The little infanta gown, you know, the shape that you saw Nicolas Chesquier do, that's from the little Spanish princesses that Cristobal coveted in the Velázquez paintings from the Balenciaga.
God, your knowledge is amazing. It's making me feel bad, especially given how tired I am.
No, it's just that I've kind of focused on those things. Yeah.
Should we have a look at the collection in a... So just to sort of give some context, obviously he's done his menswear, but this was really kind of the kind of main push of his sort of arrival. Can we just say on the first look, sorry? Because the menswear, they did quite a small presentation. But it's been interesting because I feel like as much as they were kind of gearing up to do a big splash with the women's, they have been incredibly aggressive in kind of promoting Loewe. You know, they've completely taken over the Paris billboard. They did the same thing for the men's, where there were just pictures everywhere, like the Stephen Meisel imagery, just absolutely everywhere, and the Jamie Hawksworth imagery everywhere. And also just loads online on Instagram. They put up the campaign, I think it was not yesterday, the day before.
Yeah, they did a look number 7.
Yeah, look number 7, exactly. So kind of, it's just a really interesting way of kind of rebooting.
Well, they've moved, haven't they, to like a church. They've got a big head office over there in Paris now.
Yeah.
Bernardo knows. He's putting a lot of belief behind JW.
Yeah, he was at the show.
They're delighted. They're obviously really excited.
They had the show also at the UNESCO building, which, you know, organisation that encourages international peace and respect for human rights, which is quite amusing to have a fashion show there, but whatever.
Come on, we're a source of positivity and...
Yeah.
And I think it had the right floor.
Yeah. Everyone was sat on rocks, which I quite like, which I also find quite funny because all the scraps of fabric make me think of Pebbles Flintstone, who is my fashion icon. So pretty exciting.
I was going to ask, is this a leather dress, the first one? Is that
I think it's leather.
It looks like it's referencing a chamois.
Yeah.
You know, which is a kind of funny, irreverent way, I suppose, to present a luxury leather. You know, everybody's waiting for him to work with luxury leather, and he's like, right, well, here's a dress made out of chamois.
Yeah, that's so cool because again, it makes it low key and easy.
Yeah, and no one's really doing kind of scrappy leather. I think that's quite interesting. Is if you think of everyone doing leather, it's kind of this very, even designers like Marcus Almeida who work in a very kind of like when they do leather, it's kind of a boxy bag. You know, there's not that sense of.
Well, Rick Owens has been the one who's always done this sort of really great drapey, soft suede leather, suedes and leathers. But online.
But he's not known as kind of a leather house. I think that's what's interesting with this. That kind of, you'd expect kind of great stiff bag.
I think that's what makes it approachable, though, that uptight kind of lady approach to leather. It's just time for somebody to make it kind of soft. Street, cool and soft.
But also fashion, because I think leather can feel really anti-fashion. Even the Rick Owens jackets, I think they've become kind of, and it doesn't seem like a fashion proposition.
It's too spiky and pointy, it becomes undesirable.
What were you going to say?
I was just saying the second look there with the around the neck, it's like the sample cards of, you know, the fabric. It's really nice the way he's just again incorporated that.
It is interesting. I like that's something that I did have a peek at the collection.
Like, you know, the sample of the different fabrics and different
leathers.
Like swatches.
But I like that because that kind of sense of a work in progress that I think he manages to play with in quite interesting ways.
You were talking about the Balenciaga kind of the importance of religion, and those first 2 and 3 are extremely demure in that glance. It's quite Sunday dress.
But again, this in process thing. This is the stomping ground of Margiela and Helmut Lang. You know, luxury in process reveals the value even more because it's not finished. And it almost lets you into the atelier. It makes you feel like, oh, this is what it was, you know. And it's very postmodern. It's kind of, you know, it's not luxury just to have swatches just put there, but it is a new kind of luxury.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, this idea of the process, But I also think we've talked about it, actually, less so this season and last season, but the season before that, a lot about craft and this kind of absolute love of things that look handmade, and I think that this feels like it's kind of tying into that, even though it's very, very polished. It's not rustic in any way, but there is an element that does feel quite a little bit kind of crafty, which I think feels quite modern. And I'm interested in the balance between that undoneness, but also there's a real primness, which I think feels very modern. You know, we talk a lot on the panel about the influence of Valentino, and I know aesthetically this doesn't look that much like what the Valentino duo are doing. But then there is that sense of demureness, which I think feels really current, but done in an undone way, which when you think undone in Helmut Lang, you kind of think clothes falling off a little bit. And I think that this feels different to that, which is quite interesting, that kind of combination of modesty.
Yeah, no, it's a success. It looks great.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And it's obscuring the silhouette, which he does a lot. You know, he's not afraid, and people who wear his clothes aren't afraid to, you know, it's not kind of traditional sexy. I think that's interesting.
It is interesting, and I think it's also nice because it gives an identity to his brand anyway, because you look at this and even just from kind of the 6 looks that we've seen, it feels grown up, and then you kind of, and his own label I think can feel very young, you know, it feels very kind of cool and like a very slim, cute, cool girl would wear it, whereas this feels very much like clothes for kind of moneyed women.
Yeah, I think anyone could wear this.
Yeah.
I don't know, that top on 6 is not an easy top, you need absolutely no breasts.
It's a knit halter neck as well, it's absolutely
that's
beautiful. Will and the gang do a really good version if anyone's looking to snap one.
I've often said that he doesn't know what to do with women's chests.
You did,
I'm
I
quite interested to see. I'm quite interested to see whether he's learnt yet.
Yes, he's like he just sort of doesn't really want to go for that.
But I think a lot of men don't know what to do with women's chests.
But if they're designing clothes for women, they need to learn.
But he kind of went for it with his own label. It was very kind of nipped in, and you just saw the curvy.
Yeah.
But he does do a lot of, like you said, sort of let's just wrap some material around it. And
I love that he that kind of rural jaunt that he's gone on quite recently, which feels quite new for him. And I think it started when he did that collection where, and I've forgotten the guy's name, which is going to drive me mental. He worked with that amazing tapestry guy. What's his name? I can't remember. And that you saw all those landscapes and those kind of tapestry, which was beautiful, and it felt like that was this kind of direction, and it's very similar aesthetic actually to what we're seeing printed on the t-shirts in 13, which are kind of like these little ducks and animals, and I think there's something quite interesting about that.
Do you remember when Phoebe Philo at Salino did it quite a few seasons ago, where everything went very kind of sort of, she talked about letting the light in, and it was all very kind of artisan, it was like bleached out rugs and things that felt very kind of woven and worked. It's kind of, and she uses the primaries in the same way that he does as well. It's that kind of marriage of feeling very sort of, it's again just an easiness, that lovely rural kind of.
Can we just say leather trousers? Can we just say there's been a load about leather trousers, no comments. What do we think about leather trousers?
But I love leather trousers. I think it's interesting that the black kind of skinny leather trouser
there's primary. I mean, and also the obi belts, which is something that he does a lot in his work. He comes out again and again. You know that you see that in all the trousers too.
Well, he's a big fan of Yoji, isn't he? So you can see that come through. It's interesting to talk about that rural thing, just in the context as well. I think that fashion for a while felt so, urban. There was such a focus on kind of urban wear and sportswear, and and I think it's quite interesting to see fashion go, and that feels very Spanish in a way. That notion of kind of not being in New York, it's quite nice to see. Yeah.
What about the bags? So they're sort of like a supersized Bottega with
like the big woven.
Yeah, that's quite nice.
They're quite incidental as well.
Yeah, it's not.
That is, I think that's nice.
We'll see them close up in a minute, which will be good because I want to.
The way that he's working with leather reminds me of that. Do you remember when he was working with corduroy?
Yeah,
and he was creating all that kind of like great shades with corduroy, which I really quite liked. He's really. There's some wonderful shapes and colours.
I love the 21 and 22 because I feel like that colour has come to really symbolise what he's doing there, not only because that fabric is exactly what he's used for a lot of the key bags from the first drop, the menswear drop, but also, Jamie Hawksworth, the young photographer that does all of his lookbook imagery, and he shoots the JW campaign. His imagery is so yellow, his photos, it's that kind of like slightly nostalgic, sepia tinted photography. And I really associate that colour with JW. It's like everything's seen slightly through a glass, and it feels quite nostalgic and warm and yellow.
Nice,
and that his imagery feels like that colour. Even those vintage Stephen Meisel prints that he used for the men's campaign, they were an unused editorial from Italian Vogue. That colour, like the sand, and I kind of think that's really interesting. This notion of his world and the things you associate with him.
But it's also the classic Loewe customer in a way. That trench coat there too, which is kind of I suppose.
Those two looks are beautiful.
Yeah, I love 23. It looks like she's just kind of gone for a roll around on the sunset.
It's quite silly, really.
Yeah. But that'll be editorial kind of everywhere, and like everyone's been tweeting that this morning.
Yeah, I like that one.
And I'm looking forward to fashion students kind of like whipping bits of fabric onto their black t-shirts. And
I think what's quite interesting is that it's a proper summer collection, and it's not simply a summer collection, it's a holiday collection. And I think that's quite interesting with LVMH, because I think they've really understood that people go and they buy clothes on holiday.
Yeah.
And they've got this thing where they're starting to, I feel sure they're going to do this more, but kind of start putting more high fashion outlets into hotels that the group owns.
Yeah.
I mean, particularly the kind with these printed t-shirts, you can really see that being kind of a proper high summer look.
If you think how desperate Bernardino was to get his hands on Hermes,
I
think he would have done what he's doing with Loewe with Hermes, like you said, just really blown Hermes out to this lovely high summer and taking it away from this heaviness of leather. And like you said, just letting kind of that holiday, it's just, I love it. I love, like you said, the yellow and the bleached out sort of.
It's just bleached out. It looks like it's all been left out in the sun a little bit. And you love that.
There's something really romantic about it. And this rust is just divine.
Wow. And it does look very him, even if it's only in the details, like that t-shirt we saw that had the blue around the collar, which kind of, you always think of his work at Sunspell when you think of that. And I love that there's kind of these little flashes to him. Those jumpers are gorgeous.
Yeah, lovely.
Are you a fan of what you're seeing, Oriole?
Yeah, I think it looks great. I mean, I also was going to say to Georgina, what do you think about the shoes?
Well, I knew there'd be flat shoes.
Yeah.
I thought.
Are they completely flat? I wonder if some of them
I think there's
a
a
little Cuban
rise on them. Yeah. But I think it makes it look expensive, because there's something about high shoes that looks very cheap at the moment.
But he's always been so wonderful at these trousers. I mean, the trousers hide quite a lot of the shoes because they're kind of either a monochrome sort of thing.
But all the looks at the beginning with the three-quarter dresses and skirts, that silhouette, I think it looked great because of flat shoes.
Yeah.
It looks more expensive. It looks elegant.
Just changes.
And women like this they run around in flat shoes.
Yeah. Ah,
that's always a picture at the end, isn't it? It's him running on.
He's so sweet. Bless him.
He's really gone for that trouser shape, hasn't he, in a big way?
Yeah.
But he's always had that kind of like inspired by almost like the hospital and the flats that he's had and those big
I always think
trousers.
his work looks really medical. It's interesting.
It's really medical,
and
that's a Prada thing as well.
Yeah.
So
and he used to do the windows for Prada.
Yeah.
Yes. But we were saying, I could never wear these trousers, and we were like, but the build, there'll be people like Sarah Moe going, great, great pair of pants. That's what the collection's all about.
I know. I'll happily wear the trousers.
Yeah, you look great.
I'll wear the trousers. Come my way. No, the close-ups are interesting.
Yeah, I've got a Hyde Ackerman pair of trousers like that actually.
Do you get a lot of wear out of them?
Yeah. Wow. An evening trouser.
Yeah, an evening trouser.
It's a bit much to sit down in the trouser.
I really love that top. I love number 4. That's my favourite, with the little tassel. It's quite cheerful.
It's nice.
Is that kind of cording that's coming on? Is that a bag reference? That's
it's the bag, because there's the really famous bag. It's the flamenco bag that has the 2 ties, and when he's updated it actually by kind of getting rid of that tassel and making it just 2 knots on a piece of string, so that tie, and the kind of dated version was a leather tassel. So I find it interesting that he's like ripped that off the bag and updated it with a really graphic knot, but then used that tassel on the collection. I think that's quite a nice nod, because I did think the Menswear was incredibly respectful to the heritage of Loewe. He thought very carefully about how to update pieces, which was interesting.
But in a much more like low-key, low-glamour kind of way.
Yeah.
Like, so the flamenco bags before were all in like peacock green and
very
they had
stiff,
and they were really, really like just sort of rich in that Mediterranean colour that we think of.
Yeah.
But he's just giving us this sort of much that beautiful sort of cornflower blue with that washed out. It's like you are sort of just lying, looking at a Mediterranean sky and on the beach somewhere.
There's a nice Instagram filter on it all.
I know, it does look like a collection that's all been Instagram filtered
But I mean, I was thinking about now the way that you see most kind of fashion is in photographs of celebrities knocking around, and they're either basically on holiday or walking around the street. So
But you don't need to go on holiday in this. You look like you're on holiday because it's all holiday colours. That bag's interesting, 12, because the ones we've seen before this were kind of familiar styles from the men's, but that looks quite interesting and new. I think it's interesting also to see how heavy he's gone with this kind of one earring or the asymmetric earrings. And
yeah, I mean, he is a big fan of that, isn't he? That kind of asymmetric, kind of imbalance. Again, Japanese thing.
I think there's a real contrast in some of the bags, which is interesting because, like, if you look at number 15 there, that green, that feels completely different. Can we just scroll back to the kind of patchwork shopper, which is totally different? Yeah. You know, it's quite interesting.
Is that a heritage bag though? Is that?
I presume, that's, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, I know the name of it.
I know, so do I.
So I think that's, again, being respectful to the heritage.
Yeah, and there's a client for that. You know, if you bought that bag from Loewe for ages, you don't want to suddenly go in there and find a big, crazy patchwork shopper. And
well, they are going to have a lot of very loyal key customers.
Yes.
And he's put that with the most teenage silhouettes as well.
Yeah.
Is the bag called the Granada?
Granada, yeah, I think so.
Something like that. Okay.
Is it Granada? No. Is that what you were saying before?
No, that was the one that's launched in 2012.
Yeah, no, maybe
it's flamenco and then there's the... sorry. These trousers, they're really like lurid and industrial, like pop of yellows.
They look like scrubs, but done in leather.
Scrubs, yeah, this is the thing, yeah.
No, I think you're right, you have to be very tall and thin to get away with them, basically, don't you?
And they're high-waisted as well.
I like them in navy, I think that's quite cool. They'd be quite squeaky, I imagine.
Maybe they're extremely buttery soft, who knows?
Yeah, they are.
One would hope the leather's a beautiful
They'd
quality.
They'd have to be, because they'd be too heavy.
Yeah, I don't want to see Katy Perry wearing number 19.
But again, this is a very Margiela thing, like Raf Simons, when he was at Jill Sander for his menswear, did this kind of ode for the anniversary for Jill Sander to Margiela, did all these like really extra long trousers that kind of like puddled at the floor. And
I really like the bag we're seeing in 22 because it almost looks like a kind of wicker little bag that you'd collect your apples in, and then it's done in that.
Is it done in suede?
Yeah, which is I think
really
something quite
nice.
lovely about that. There's just something really pleasing about this collection. I think it's really lovely. It's really, really strong, and it feels. I just love how outdoorsy it is. You know, it's like, that could be a tablecloth, and that's like and it kind of looks dated, but in a really knowing way. You know, like those look like the kind of pictures that you'd see on a wall in some kind of slightly dodgy hotel that's been around for slightly too long, but it's really, really beautiful.
But there's kind of like an ironic charm to it.
Yeah, that kind of like little curtains with checks, and it's very nice.
I really like those check tops actually. Again, are they patchwork with leather?
Maybe, yeah.
And I love the way it kind of warps at the bottom.
It's nicely done. So patching seems to be a big theme.
Yeah. I like it because it feels very clean, which is nice. You know, and there's a lot of stuff that I think increasingly stuff that feels really, really luxurious is the stuff that does just feel really clean. You know, it's designed and it's interesting and it's not minimal in a classic way, but it just feels really clean. And I think stuff that's kind of over embellished or over designed, it just feels quite tired now. Yeah.
I know it's a lot about the fabrics too, and this I can imagine, as you were saying, Georgina, that feel of those trousers. You just really want to, and the sort of suede as well, to touch them.
Oh, here comes a bit of a heel.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited. Let's see. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, a little bit of a wedge.
It's like a little
wedgie.
It's very pretty. So we're a fan. It seems like we're all impressed.
I love it.
But it kind of seduces you.
He's judged it really well, I think.
But you know what we were saying about kind of it reminds you of other things and subliminally it sort of gets in. Like look 29, like the lady there, she was actually just in that other photograph as well. Thank you for going back. But look, it's the sky. It's the look 29 with the sky blue sort of knit with the chevron to the side, in the sky blue with the maroon. That is almost like an ode to the Prada knits from Womenswear last season. And what he's done is he's skewed the chevron and given us it just there. And that is connected, you know what I mean? So it's like he takes the code of what somebody's done, and of course, like you said, he has a connection with Prada. And it's almost like subliminally we love it because we've already digested it.
Yeah, you're totally right.
And he's not copied it, but he is assimilated sort of, you know, kind of great codes into his.
I was thinking that a
clever.
bit with the palette, some of the hues. Like I know there's a lot of that kind of, like we were talking about, that kind of sun faded, but also some of these tones, particularly in 29 and 30, you know, they remind me just a little bit on some of the tones that Raf Simons uses at Dior. You know, these kind of very bright but slightly off tones, a little bit unexpected. And I think, again, like, it's interesting, this idea of the eye becoming trained to certain things and then starting to like it, and then another designer doing it. It feels like that also is something that we've become familiar with and looks great because it's been popularised.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting, like particularly with that kind of turquoisey colour. I think of that. Yeah. Which is interesting.
Which is almost teal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is, in accessories, I always say teal, the kiss of death. And of course, designers love teal.
Yeah. Why do you say it's the kiss of death?
I don't know. Salespeople, oh, teal, kiss of death.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why. If you put a shoe in teal or a bag in teal, it doesn't sell. But we like to put teal leather is all accessories people love teal leather because it looks really.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's interesting that there aren't that many black bags. I like that he's tried to kind of slot the bags into.
They'll be the ones that are selling.
I know. Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of, there's a bag of pretty much every look, but they don't feel kind of shoved on, which is nice.
No, and you don't need to show a black bag. So it's, quite often when you're making a collection, what you sell is the black in all the the suede, the leather. But actually, what you don't need to show is the black bag, because that's the one that's always going to sell.
So do we think this will go down well? Who do you think the Loewe girl is now? Do you think there's going to be a big new shopper that enters it? I think there's going to be a huge kind of the fashion pack are definitely going to.
Absolutely.
But who are they going to draw in?
Well, I think they're going to have to get a Loewe girl and a Loewe woman. I think you're going to want mother and daughter shopping together, which is kind of interesting in the casting as well. He looked like he had some older models as well.
Yeah. So the girl can wear the trousers and the mum can wear the kind of beautiful knits and stuff. So we're fans. We're impressed. We think it's a strong.
I think it's a really strong collection. I think you'll be able to look at something that's from that brand now and say where it's from.
Yeah.
So I think that's a massive tick in the box.
Well, it's suddenly on the map, isn't it? Like if you'd have asked me like 2 years ago, do you want a bag from Loewe? I'd kind of be like, no, probably not. Yeah.
And now, do you want a bag from Loewe?
Yeah, I really do. I want that Mad Pebble Flintstone one. It's like
I want the trousers.
Do you?
I'm all about the trousers.
I'm going to try on the trousers. I'm intrigued to see what they look like. I think it'll be quite hit or miss. But I'll be safe with a bag or a pair of earrings. No, it's very good. I'm very impressed. It's actually made me quite cheerful. It's nice to see something strong and with a lot of focus. Good. Should we give him a clap?
Yeah.